The internet offers a lot of different ways for voice actors to build an audience, establish their brand, and create opportunities. Whether you're making videos for YouTube or sharing reels on Instagram or writing articles for LinkedIn. Another avenue, though, that is sometimes maybe less explored, but maybe should be more explored is podcasting. And my guest today just happens to be an expert on that very subject as the strategic lead for Share Your Genius, an award winning podcast production studio. She also happens to be a voice actor. Welcome to the show, Melanie Scroggins.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Looking forward to talking podcasting with you. I was trying to think as we were starting. I was like, okay, I want to make sure that I add value to the audience. But then I was like, yeah, but I'm a podcaster. So what are all the things that I really need to know and understand? And how can I get all that insider information from Melanie?
Exactly. You've got me here.
So the first piece of advice that I offer when a voice actor tells me they're thinking of starting a podcast is, yeah, don't start a podcast. You don't want to do that. they're they're literally
Ton
like
of work.
exponentially more work than you can even anticipate, and you just don't need the stress. But I'm guessing that your advice might be slightly different.
So my entry into podcasting years ago was just that. I was self-taught. I was reckless in what I was doing, not knowing that I was. So I was
Yep.
like extremely ignorant and having a good time. I
Sometimes
would
that's the
not
best way
do
to start.
it. And I wish I had a little bit more of that now because I just know too much. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of
Yep.
time. It's a lot of energy.
Yep.
However, and to kind of counter what you were saying, at least in my experience and for like yourself and other people that I know as well, even in this our little niche of voiceover, it was something that I couldn't have expected to be as valuable as it was, even
Mhm.
though I knew how valuable podcasting is and was, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So when I first started out, I wasn't thinking, let's make money, let's do it. It really was, I was getting so many questions, as we do, right? When you're
Yep.
in the world, you're actually getting paid to do voiceovers. People are like, how are you doing that? I was getting the same ones over and over, the same type of person. And so my audience just kind of showed itself to me without me really having to build it out. And so I just started there and I thought, okay, well, I'm getting these same questions. Let's try to scale this a little bit so then I
Yep.
can make the most of my time and their time. And then they can access the resource over and over. So it really did start that simple for me.
It's funny because that was, I mean, in some senses, it was similar for me. I had people for years asking me, when are you going to start a podcast? When are you going to start a podcast? And I'm sitting here thinking, like, do you even know what my day looks like? And you want me to start a podcast? Like,
When
yeah,
are you
sure,
going to start a
great, no
podcast, Mark?
problem. Let's
For
throw more
me.
into it.
Exactly.
But then there were two things that I thought about. One, I had reached a point where my primary source of information was podcasting.
Hmm.
I am I'm a podcast listener. I've got shows that I listen to consistently, like on a weekly basis. I want to hear every episode. I've got shows that I just tap into and I just looking for something good or whatever. So I thought about that. And then I also thought about what you just mentioned, which was a lot of voice actors are asking the same questions over and over again as they get introduced to me and discover me. And so
Hmm.
they're asking some of the same questions. And so it would be really nice to have a resource that I could be able to send people to rather than having to sit and walk through the whole thing every time with every voice actor saying, hey, by the way, here's a couple different episodes of the podcast that you might want to check out.
Yep.
And so it became, for me at that point, it became a way to gain back some of my time, which sounds counterintuitive when I realize how much time podcasting actually takes, but not having to have some of those conversations over and over and over again. But then it really does create a unique way to connect to your audience in a different way, right? And if it's true that we do business with people that know, like, and trust us, I think when you're doing a really good podcast, that's a really great way to give people an opportunity to get to know you, like you, and trust you.
I agree. It's similar to a phone call. You're always going to want that human connection that's not just text. And when someone knows, likes, and trusts you, I think it's easier to kind of have that text-based strategy, whether it's on LinkedIn or email or whatever. But I found that when someone can hear my voice and they can say, "Oh, that's Melanie." Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, and get more familiar with how you actually sound, which is so funny because that's such a big part of podcasting, such a big
Yep.
part of voiceover and what our clients are looking, that side of the spectrum of what our clients are looking for. I find that aspect really interesting. And that also kept me going. Like, what is it about this that's interesting? Why do people feel comfortable? Why are they asking me and not
Yep.
someone else?
Yep.
And I took that very seriously.
Yep. So the $1 million question, this is probably going to set the tone for the entire interview, because the interview may continue on from here, or this might just be the end of it right here. It just might, depending on how the response is to this. But can podcasting be a marketing tool for voice actors if they are not going to do a podcast about voiceover? Because I think that's part of the problem is they assume it's got to be a voiceover podcast to bring value or add value to their voiceover business. So what is the answer to that?
It's an awesome question. I've thought a lot about this actually, particularly because of our conversation that I knew we were going to have. One, I absolutely believe that's possible, and I'll tell you
Oh,
why.
we get to carry on with the interview then.
We get to carry on. We're going to do it.
All
Can you
right.
handle it? We're going
I'm
to keep
getting comfortable
talking.
now. I'm ready to go. Let's do it. I thought
Awesome.
maybe you were going to be like, no. And I was going to be like, okay, well, thanks for coming on the show.
It's 100% possible. Think about it.
Yes.
So, one, there are endless opportunities in podcasting, which often
Yeah.
feels overwhelming.
Mhm.
I work in this space and I feel that way too. I'm like, wow, this is a lot of information and it is constantly changing. That is a good thing. That means that there is so much that can happen, particularly in the format that you want to take. Who are you talking to? What do you want to do? That's always where to start. Obviously, you've got to anchor in why you actually want to do it and why it matters and who it matters for. So, do you just want to tell a story? Like, are you trying to, who are you trying to reach? Like, is it actually the client side? Is it someone also looking to come kind of behind you, like it was for me, like it is for you? It really depends on who you're trying to reach and then what format you're interested in, because it doesn't need to necessarily be interview like this. Mine were mostly solo episodes. I would go on and answer questions. And of course, that was specifically for voiceover, but maybe there's something else that you're really good at or is tied to your work in some way. So the one thing that I would pull from that I'd want to encourage people to do is, if you are really interested in pursuing podcasting as a marketing tool for your voiceover business specifically, or something tangential, think about the value that think about the value that you bring. Think about what you know that other people may not know as well, and dig into that. Spend some time actually asking yourself those questions. You can utilize our friends like ChatGPT and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Like, these are some ideas that I have. Like, can you help me brainstorm? It's a really good place to start. But short answer to your question is, it's absolutely possible. I'm a believer.
I think it's good to hear you say that, because I think one of the things that I see over and over and over in my coaching, and usually it's around content creation, but then, and we're talking social media content creation, but I mean, podcasting is just another form of content creation. It's this trap that we are stuck inside the voiceover box, that in order for us to bring value to our voiceover business, we have to be able to talk about voiceover, and we get stuck in that rut. And so either we create more voiceover content, which doesn't do anything really other than attract more voice actors to
Right.
our audience in more cases than not, or we just don't do anything because we think, I'm not a coach. What do I have to offer? Why do I want to talk about voiceover? And so it's
Right.
good to hear you say that, because I think that's a big part of it. I think the other side of this, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but I feel like podcasting could actually be a natural fit for a lot of voice actors, just because so many of us come from a radio background where communication and interviewing and storytelling are such a big part of the job. And so, I'm not going to say that that just makes us an instant natural fit, but there are some skills that I think that we bring from that background and experience that lends itself to podcasting. It felt like a natural, easy thing for me to get into. I had to find my groove, right? I
Yeah.
got to find my voice. I was a crap interviewer in the beginning, like I got to figure some of those things out. But now it just feels kind of comfortable to me to be able to do that, and my background lends itself to that. Is that fair?
100%. And one thing that I was going to say, right in line with what you're saying, is like, think of all the skills that you've learned how long have you been doing this show now? Like
You're
5 years,
you are
6?
episode 299.
It's
So
amazing.
yeah, so it's been a
Could
few years.
Let me ask you one thing. Could you have anticipated you would have been more than 200 episodes deep at this point
Oh
in
my
your
gosh,
show?
I didn't think I was going to make it past the first month.
So how much have you learned
Yeah.
years later
No,
doing this?
100%. And the show has evolved over time, right? I started out as it was just me, and I did that intentionally thinking that's going to be less work. If it's just me, it's less editing, less
Yeah.
variables. I don't have to worry about a guest prepping an interview. Is their
Scheduling.
sound going to be good? Or,
Yeah.
scheduling for sure, all these sorts of things. And so I did a solo show for a really long time. And then I got to a point where I was like, I'm running out of things to talk about. I got to get some other people on the show. And so I ended up having to do the very thing that I had been avoiding all along. And the irony of it is that it was it's never been as bad as what I thought it was going to be. Like all of those problems that I was anticipating, struggling to put together an interview, asking the right questions, making it interesting. What
Yeah.
if their audio sucks? What if their video sucks? All this sort of stuff. It's just,
Yeah.
it all ended up ultimately being mostly non-issues that I was just
Yeah.
using as a really good excuse to avoid doing the thing. I'm a king procrastinator. People don't realize that about me, but yeah, I've learned a ton over the years. And if I'm sure if you went back and if I went back and listened to some of those early episodes, I'd be like, God, it's a wonder that anybody actually ever did listen to the show. But now here we are on episode 299 and however many years later. So
It's amazing. And
yeah.
I would imagine that not only did it teach you, hey, there's something valuable here, but it taught you better communication skills,
Mhm.
taught you exactly what you were saying of, you know what, this is actually interesting. This is what I want to know. And you learned how to hone in on those topics, on those things that you wanted to be sure that you covered that would be valuable for your audience. There are so many different skills that go into and come out of podcasting that is also important to discuss, because it's not just about the production. It's not just about, cool, now when it's in the world, what is it going to do? It's all about the entire process.
I remember listening to it. I think it was Donald Miller. I was listening to his show. I'm pretty sure it was on Donald Miller's show. And he was talking about the fact that for him, early in his podcast, his entire mentality was, who are people that I would really love to talk to and learn from, and
Yeah.
how do I get them to come on my show?
Yep.
Because if I want to work with them one on one, I want to do an hour with name a name. It's going to cost me $1,000 or $1,500 for an hour of their time. But if
Yep.
I can get them to come on the show, they'll come on the show for free, and I get to ask them all the questions that I want. And so he's like, I'm literally getting free master classes every week from the people that I want to know or the people that I want to learn from. And I was like, dang, when I heard that, I was like, all right, I got to get Tina Marasco on the show.
And why not, right?
Yeah,
And there was
exactly.
something when I worked at a company with a couple other ladies a few years ago called Podcast Production School, and that was one of our through lines, is like, why not you? Why not now?
Yeah.
Like, there are so many things to learn. And even as voice actors, one of the things that I always honed in when I was actively educating people on a weekly basis was, you have got to learn your craft. And what better way to do it than get behind the mic and continuously stretch yourself in, how do I want to communicate this? How am I going to edit this? What is this actually going to translate to when the
Yep.
final episode is complete? So it's not just, I'm in front of the microphone, I'm talking, or I'm interviewing someone, and then we're going to share it. It is, how am I learning? What kind of things can I take from this? And how is this valuable to me and my business?
Yeah.
It's a bunch of different stuff.
So we know now that we don't have to do a podcast about voiceover in order for it to have value. And I think we've established that, for at least a certain percentage of voice actors anyway, podcasting might be a natural fit if you enjoy doing the interview or if you are a great communicator, great storyteller, whatever. How do we actually come up with the show? I mean, it seems like there's a podcast for every subject under the sun, pretty much. So,
Yeah.
do we pick something we know? Do we pick something we love or we have a passion about? Do we pick
Hmm.
something where, I don't know, we think there's an audience and so we want to try to fill a need? Are we trying to be a subject matter expert? Like,
Right.
what are the things that we need to think about in those early stages when we're like, okay, I think podcasting is a good fit. I don't want to do a voiceover podcast.
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah. Such a good question. And I feel like if more people would sit in that and really ask themselves those questions, they'd probably have a few ideas that they didn't realize were even in their heads unless
Yeah.
they spent the time to do it. So the first thing that I would start with is your point of view. What is it that you are bringing that might be slightly different? Just start jotting it down. And one thing that I'll say is, people get really boxed in by their own ideas. They think that they're going to put something down. And I think this might be training from school or something, but they think they're going to write something down that is incorrect, that is wrong, that somebody is going to get onto them about. Understand that when you're first starting out and trying to figure out what it is that you're going the direction you want to go, everything is in bounds.
Yep.
So start there. What is your point of view? What do you know? What are you interested in? What gets you excited? I obviously love podcasting. I've been in it a long time. I love talking about it. That's why I'm here. What is it that you enjoy talking about? And how are you coming at it from a different perspective than somebody else? Or what do you share? What perspective do you share? Who are those people? Who are your inspiration? What do you see in here and that you like? What do you see, graphically, video? Like, what are your inspiration? One thing that we call it at Share Your Genius is, if you were to put together your ideal show, something that matched your brand, whatever your outcome or your goal is for your show. What's your show, baby? What inspiration from the world do you take? What this and that creates what you would like? That's one way to look at it as well. Some people are visual. Some people just want to sit and brainstorm. A mix of the two will help you get a really good baseline for what it is that you want to do and the message that you can share that will be valuable. From there, it's important to talk about your audience. Who are you trying to reach? Some of the time, we don't know who those people are yet. So it's important to sit down and say, okay, I'm obviously an audience member for something.
Mhm.
So what's interesting to me? So start with your perspective, start with your good at and what you know, and then move into, okay, who are these people that I'm trying to reach? What is my ultimate goal? You have to have the anchor.
Let's talk a little bit more about the goals. What are some of those early goals that we need to set? Is it as simple as I have to decide what I want to talk about, and I have to figure out who the audience is that is interested in that so that I
Mm-hmm.
can talk about what I want to talk about in a way that appeals to them? Like, is it
Right.
that simple? Is that the goal? Like, what, or are there other things in those early stages that we need to be thinking about when we're in the development stage and trying to come up with how this whole thing is going to look?
There's so many different elements. And again, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So starting very basically with what would I want to do and what's interesting and what interests me is number one. Number two, start thinking of your audience. Who are these people? When I see them online, this is a great way to understand the people that you're trying to reach. If you kind of have an idea of who they are, go to LinkedIn, look at the conversations that they're having, look at who
Yep.
they're interacting with, look at the people that you look up to and say, what conversations are they having? What's interesting to them? Get inspiration from there. From that point, thinking about again, like what you enjoy listening to, what you enjoy interacting with will give you a lot of inspiration. Then you're going to move into why are you doing this? What is the ultimate goal? Do you have a lot of free time and you want to be creative? Great. Do you have a business and you're trying to drive awareness, brand engagement, demand, dollars?
Yeah.
What is it that you're after? This is one direction that people get so lost in and so confused by, and they end up trying to create something for everyone.
Yeah.
That does not work. What are you trying to do? If it's not make money, are you trying to be creative? If you don't just want to be creative, then are you trying to create a brand where you can share, where you can be engaging and create and set that foundation for know, like, and trust? Where are you at?
I think we're probably going to burst some bubbles here, but as you're talking about some of this stuff, it makes me think like when I started my show, I did not have any illusions about generating millions of downloads or making millions of dollars. Like, I'm not Rogan, I'm not Tim Ferriss, I'm not, Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a
And very few
CEO,
people are.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I was surprised to see some of the numbers for podcasting. So the average podcast gets around 30 downloads on the first week. 30
30,
30
3
downloads.
0.
A top 5% podcast gets just over 1,000 downloads in the first week. That blew my mind because I thought everybody was getting, all the big guys were getting millions of downloads or whatever, but like a top 5% podcast getting 1,000 downloads. And so I think we probably need to set some realistic expectations about what is actually going to happen, because I feel like that's also one of the areas where we burn out when we create that show. We do 5 or 6 episodes, we get 25 downloads, 5 of them are our mom, and then we're like, this is pointless. What am I even doing?
And you know what you just said is exactly why those numbers are the way they are, right?
Because
Because
everybody
people
burns out.
start, they do 5 or 6 episodes,
Yep.
maybe.
Yep.
That's being generous.
Yeah.
And then they're done. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think is the key to increasing those numbers? Why are they in the top 5% if they have 1,000 downloads for the first week?
Yeah,
What are they doing?
I so to me, just to be clear, I would have thought to be a top 5% podcast, I literally was thinking you needed like hundreds of thousands of downloads. Like
Yeah.
when I read that number, I'm like, come on, you got to be kidding me. Cause I'm pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Like my first week downloads are probably average around 800. And I'm like, I am not. Like if I'm a top 5% podcast in the world, we need to change the bar.
Yeah.
Like, so
Or we need to get very clear, like you said, on expectations and what these numbers actually mean.
Yep.
Why do you think you've been so successful in the last few years?
I know who I'm talking to. I know who I'm talking to, and I appreciate that I'm talking to a very specific niche, and I'm even not even that I'm talking to a niche, I'm a niche inside of a niche. Because a lot of voiceover podcasts are more general voiceover.
Mhm.
I'm a voiceover marketing podcast
Yep.
to voiceover. And so I'm a niche inside of a niche. And so I had to know out of the gate, I'm not going to get thousands of downloads. Like it is very unlikely that I'm going to get thousands of downloads or tens of thousands of downloads or whatever. But that was never the objective for me in the end anyway, right? My objective
Right.
was more about creating a resource, having something that I could refer people to, like we talked about earlier, so I don't have to answer the same sort of questions over and over and over again. And
Yep.
obviously, I do coaching, and so there's an element of just add a ton of value so that people can see this guy's the real deal. And maybe if some of them see that and believe that, at some point they'll buy a class from me or do coaching with me or something like that. So the expectation for me was never specifically about downloads.
Yeah.
And that's probably a good thing because if I think back to some of my early numbers, I'd be like, what in the world? Actually, I probably did ask myself that question multiple times. Like the amount of time that I'm putting into the show
Yeah.
for 12 people to listen, like this is not worth it, is it?
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you the second answer to why you're so successful, and it's consistency.
Showing
And
up
that's
every
what you'll
week.
see. That's what you'll see across the board.
Yeah.
You have to be consistent. That's why the upfront work is crucial,
Yeah.
essential. You can't do anything else. You can't move into production if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing.
How many episodes, and I know this probably isn't a fair question, but generally speaking,
Yeah.
from your experience, how many episodes do we realistically need to say, I'm going to commit to X
Yep.
before I start making any decisions about what happens next? Because, we talked about the fact that 3 or 4 episodes and most podcasts fade off into oblivion.
Yep.
Is there a number that you tell your people, like, look, you've got to get your first 25 or you've got to get your first 50 or does that exist? Does a statistic like that exist?
It probably varies across shows, across agencies, depending on what data you're using. But from where we sit for our clients, and I would imagine this is pretty similar in the industry just because of the wide range of clients we have in the B2B space, you need to dedicate it. This is going to be unpopular. You need to dedicate at least 6 to 12 months of
Mm,
content on a regular basis. So whether that cadence is once a month and you've got,
yep,
a strategy around that, whether it's biweekly or whether it's every week,
yep.
whatever your cadence is, stick to it and be consistent and stick with it for at least 6 to 12 months. That is the only way that you're going to know.
And I think that's universal. I mean, I say the same thing about social media, right? Oh, I put a few posts up on Instagram and nothing happened. I'm like, okay, talk to me when you've put a few posts up on Instagram every week for a year
Yep.
and let's see whether or not anything happened. And
Yep.
so that carries over into the podcast space as well. And I think, I mean, that is part of it, right? We come in with this crazy expectation of what we're going to get. We don't see it. We give up too soon,
Yep.
and we miss out on what is potentially there. The abandonment rate of podcasts is actually pretty crazy
Oh
to me.
man.
And I think maybe part of it is because of how stubborn I am. But when I think about how much work I put into getting the show started, the idea of walking away after 3 or 4 episodes, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Do you know what it
Yep.
took to get this thing started? Like, I am
Yep.
committed to this now for the long haul, until I produce the result that I want to see, because I can't imagine just throwing away all of that work in the beginning to getting it set up.
It's a good differentiator. And I believe that that's extremely powerful. I would imagine that you felt empowered and motivated to continue because of all the resources and time you put into it. And that's, in my personal opinion, where you should be. So if you are trying to put something out in the world and you don't feel that, you need to go back to the drawing board and say,
Yeah.
okay, what are my goals? What am I actually trying to do here? Because if I'm going to spend this time and energy, it needs to be working in some way for me or my business or from a greater goal that I have that I want to achieve the next 6 to 12 months.
I knew very early on that my goal was to try to drive the coaching, right? I want to establish myself as somebody who knows what he's talking about and drive the coaching. I think for the voice actor who wants to get into podcasting, I think most of them are thinking, I want it to drive my voiceover business. And the
Sure.
struggle is trying to figure out how to get it to drive the voiceover business. And one of the points that I've made with people in the past when I've talked to them is, look, you do a podcast about, name the subject, whatever it is,
Yep.
collecting vintage Nikes. If you show up every week and do that show consistently every week, it
With all
stands
of
to
these
reason that there are voice
product
buyers out
managers,
there
a
who
100%.
wear Nikes. And so I think that's what we're not seeing, is we're not realizing that in the midst of the audience of whatever the subject is
Right.
that you choose, somewhere in there, there's probably some voice buyers
Yep.
that are going to find you and that are going to want to have a conversation with you.
One thing that I did before I had my second child, which the timing was awful, I invited a couple of my clients who were doing something really unique that I had kind of never heard of. It was like an interactive, I mean, they were open with the story. So it was an interactive museum in a small town in Canada. And I did the voice for like this little interactive museum right there in the airport talking about Kelowna.
Okay.
Am I saying that right? Kelowna. Anyway, but I said, hey, would you be willing to come on the show? I have this podcast. I talk about what I do in voiceover. What you do is really unique. I'd love to just share that. One, I would love to learn about the process because I was involved in a different part of the process. And two, I think this would be really interesting for people like me in the field who are getting started and want to learn about the different genres. This
Right.
is a really unique genre. And they said, absolutely. So I had both of them on and we talked. And again, the reason it's a poor example is because it never saw the light of day, unfortunately. But that was a really great opportunity for me to not only showcase, hey, I can do more than just be behind a mic. Also, I can now get in front of these people. We're looking face to face. We're having a conversation. That's a whole different skill set. And then being able to learn more about, okay, how does this look? Like, what does
Yeah.
this actually mean when we're creating things? Because we show up, we have a live session, whatever the process is for the client. And then a lot of the time it's goodbye. And sometimes they'll follow up and say, hey, here's the final product, or you can find it on their website or whatever. So it gave me a really interesting insight into what was going on. And again, that's voiceover specific, but I wanted to share that because it showcases there are so many different avenues for better understanding our industry and our craft. And a lot of the time it's the source, but sometimes it's exactly what you're talking about. It's having these conversations with people who are kind of connected to what we're doing, but not really. But I'm really interested in the subject matter. And as long as I'm being very, to the point about what my goals are, I mean, everybody wins.
I think maybe we also need to think outside of specifically voiceover. If you can build a credible podcast in a niche market or a niche segment, there are other opportunities to potentially monetize that as well. So maybe it's that there are people who buy voiceover who will hear your show and maybe they'll want to hire you for voiceover, but maybe it's that you become an influential voice in the space and there's brand partnerships, sponsorships, whatever. And I think that's something else that is often misunderstood is that, I've got to have 1 million downloads in order to get anybody to take me seriously. And I think one of the things that we've learned, particularly with the rise of user generated content,
Mm-hmm.
is you could have an audience of 5,000 people or 1,000 people in the right niche.
Even that, I mean,
And there are people that are going to want to have a conversation with you.
absolutely. If it's 1,000 of the right people versus 10,000 of possibly not the right people, I'm going to choose that 1,000 group over the 10,000 any day because of the engagement level we're going to be able to have, because of them sharing my post, because of them emailing me or feeling comfortable enough to email me and say, hey, would you be interested in doing this thing? We get so bogged down with numbers. And I'm really glad that you brought up downloads again, because I thought of this earlier. One thing that we stress a lot in the work that I do is just totally clean the slate of the numbers that you have in your head. Because the first question we ask is, why is it that many downloads? Why is it that many views for your YouTube video? What is that? And you know what they normally say? Because I
Because,
think ...
yeah. Yep.
That's not a good enough answer. And to be totally honest, there's no truth in it. When you are a Joe Rogan, when you're a Mel Robbins, and you have these giant numbers, these giant downloads, that's a totally different part of their business that they're working on. They have now moved into the influencer space.
Yep.
When we're talking about what we're trying to do here with our businesses and trying to, set these goals and achieve these goals over a certain amount of time, you're looking for conversion. Are my audience members taking the intended action? Period. There are no numbers associated. We can worry about the numbers later. That's why data is important. The first thing you need to make sure of, and I'm going to come back to this time and time again because I've seen it so many times over the last 10 years, you have got to be sure you know why you're doing what you're doing. Why are you going to make a show? You need to be sure it's the right marketing tool for you. Because I will say it's not for everyone, but there is a lot of possibility and opportunity for people, specifically in the voiceover space, that this can be a really great opportunity for them.
So let's come at the numbers from a different perspective. If we know that it only takes 1,000 downloads, 1,000 on your first week, just to clarify. So you release a show, you get 1,000 downloads in the first week. You achieve that benchmark, you are a top 5% podcast, which is just bananas to me.
It is bananas.
It's pretty safe to assume that, well, I mean, the numbers say it, 95% of podcasts are getting less than 1,000 downloads per week. There are a lot of good podcasts out there that are providing a lot of good information, that are doing a lot of great things for their creators, and they are obviously doing it on small numbers. So I don't know if you can share this or if this is a fair question, but like with your company, how many podcasts are you guys responsible for? How many podcasts have you worked on and created? And I'm guessing they're not all million download podcasts.
They're not. However, for those that are the most successful, one thing that we look for is listener rate. So we are fortunate that we have a really unique and proprietary data set that we can use to see how people are listening, how long people are listening. And what we have learned is a 65% listener rate. So say you have a 30-minute podcast, and if someone listens to 2/3 of that,
yep,
that is what we're looking for. That's gold. Anything above that is just icing on the cake. So that's one big thing that we're looking for. Again, that's not really associated with a particular download number.
No,
that is engagement.
And that's the point. I think the point here is blowing up this notion that I've got to get a lot of downloads to make it worth my while.
Out of open your window and throw it out.
Yeah.
Because people have gotten so confused and so bogged down, and all we see is Joe Rogan, and he's done great. That's fantastic. Y'all, he was a celebrity before he started podcasting. Yeah. So let's just get very real about who these people are. If I could
get some of those people to come on my show, I could probably get 100,000 downloads too. Like
100%. And one thing I want to share that we talk about at Share Your Genius a lot when we're working with people who are starting a show and really trying to formulate what they're doing and where they can break through in their niche is there are 4 kind of basic things that we want to focus on, and you need to rank them in order. And I'm just going to share them with you. So one of them is premise. It's the promise that you're making. What are you making? How important is that to you? 2, talent. Is your host essential for the podcast to happen? Can they change over time? Because the content is what drives the show.
Right.
Or is it your guests? So take Joe Rogan, for instance, take Kevin Hart, take Conan O'Brien. If they didn't have celebrity guests, which Conan does a great job of talking to regular people as well. They've got a really cool dual audience there and purpose for what they're doing. But if they don't have those people, the show isn't what it is. It's not Conan O'Brien, needs a friend anymore. So just as an example, that's talent. Community. Is there a community aspect that is way more important than the content or the people who are hosting the episode? And the 4th is format. Is there a format? So we use the example of Hot Ones a lot. Without the hot sauce, Hot Ones is not that hot. And it's just another celebrity interview show. Mm-hmm. So those are the 4 things that we like to kind of define and think about when we're looking to create a show, and we have our people rank them in order. So for most of us, people listening here, for you most likely, and for myself and the work that I do, premise is usually number 1. I need to be sure that I am making a promise and I'm fulfilling that promise each week. Otherwise, my engagement and conversion is kind of irrelevant because no one's going to know, like, and trust me. So just as a way to kind of break down what's more important than numbers, it's getting very clear on what you're doing and why and what's most important to you. And then that translates into, this is the audience that I'm nurturing and this is how. And are they engaging with me and communicating with me? What else is happening outside of my show? And one thing we always say around here, which is one reason I believe podcasting is right now the number 1 marketing tool for any business. It's never just a podcast. Yeah. It's a conversation. It's a sale. It's a speaking engagement. It's a book.
Yep.
Endless opportunities.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
This is going to be fun or not. You might storm off and leave
I'm just having a sip of
Riverside.
coffee. Okay.
Let's create a case study.
Oh, I
I would
love it.
love to just create a case study example, taking into consideration all the things that we've just talked about. So there's a voice actor who is listening to this show right now, and we are, half an hour in, and they're continuing to listen because they're fascinated by all of this, and they're thinking maybe podcasting is for me. But they're trying to figure out, what does this look like realistically
Mm-hmm.
for me to start a show that has value or potential benefit to my voiceover business that isn't about voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
So let's walk through some steps of, okay, this is what you decide that you want to talk about. This is the audience that you decide that you want to reach. This is the format that you decide that you're going to take. This is how there's a potential tie back to creating value for your voiceover business without specifically talking about voiceover. Can we create some sort of scenario here on the spot to just kind of lay it out for people?
Yeah. Do you have a particular persona in mind? Like a person who is like a voice actor who maybe, okay, they're full-time. Let's go there, because then they're
Okay.
thinking, okay, what else can I do for my business? They're a full-time
Okay.
voice actor
So we
getting
got a
paid,
full-time voice actor.
full-time voice actor,
Making some money,
making some money,
listens to Marc Scott talk about email marketing,
has taken your marketing
absolutely
course.
hates it when Marc Scott talks about email marketing, is absolutely anti-email marketing. So he wants to come up with a totally different way of putting themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
And podcasting is where they think that it's it. Because I don't want to send emails. I don't want to do social media. I want to
Yep.
do something different. So we're creating a podcast.
Okay. So I just had an idea come to mind. So this person normally does documentary, more of those professional kind of techie explainer videos. Their voice warrants themselves to more of that kind of professional but educational tone. So they tend to do more of that work.
Okay.
This person also happens to be extremely interested in National Geographic.
Okay.
Maybe at one point they wanted to be a photographer. I'm just making stuff up.
Okay.
This person is just telling me who they are as we're going along. They wanted to be a photographer. Everybody kept telling them they have a great voice. They started in voiceover, and now here they are, let's say 3 to 5 years later,
Mhm.
making a pretty decent living in voiceover. The first thing that I would ask this person if they came to me and said, okay, I'm at a point where this is what I do for work. I love my work. The podcast is going to be just for me. It's going to be another way that I can use my skill set. I have enough to hire an editor. Where would we start? So I'd start the exact same way we started earlier, which is, okay, awesome. What interests you? You've told me what you do for work. You told me that you enjoy that. That's awesome. Set that aside. What interests you? What gets you excited to talk about? That's number one.
Okay.
The second thing that I would do, they'll tell me, well, I really like National Geographic. I'm really drawn to particularly like history. So, NASA, space, that kind of stuff that National Geographic does. As an example, they also like to travel. Okay. Do you like travel shows? Yeah. Love travel shows. What part of the world are you interested in? Just curious. This is very similar to how a lot of these conversations go, by the way.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, where in the world would you want to go? What interests you? Do you know a lot about a certain part of the world? Yeah, actually, I know a lot about Africa. That's one reason I wanted to be a photographer. Okay. Very interesting. So what about Africa fascinates you? What do you know? I know a lot about the animals there. I know a lot about the plant life there. I'm really interested in that. Okay. Interesting. Who do you know in that space that also knows a lot about Africa and the wildlife and the plant life? I happen to not be an expert, so I would rely on them to tell me. Then I would have them share inspiration. Like what piques your interest when you're watching and consuming media? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a podcast. They can send me stuff, all of that. Down the line, so the next conversation we'd have is getting more into, great. Now you've done your homework. You've kind of thought about what interests you, what piques your interest out in the wild, what you're really interested in and educated in. Now what? And what we would do is formulate the show. So I've been talking a lot. What questions would you have as you go in to formulate the show? So pretend we'll call him Rob, and he's really interested in this, looking for creating a podcast that's going to help market his business. but not his voiceover business. It's going to be tangential. So let me know if you have any questions about like formatting or like his approach.
I mean, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about a guy that I'm thinking about some sort of storytelling. There's stories to tell in there, and if I can, I think, I mean, for me, voiceover 101 is when you have a connection to the script in some way, it makes it so much easier to deliver a great read.
Yeah.
So if I'm telling stories about a subject that I am deeply passionate about or deeply interested in,
Yeah.
that's going to be a lot more engaging and entertaining, I think.
And what's interesting too, and I just thought about this, Rob let me know what he's thinking. But he comes to me the second week and he says, I think I've been thinking about this all wrong. I think I've been thinking about the fact that I want to be the next Richard Attenborough. But I don't think that's the direction I want to go. My kids watch Miss Rachel. I love her style. I love that she breaks it down and it's easy for little kids to understand. I know a lot about Africa. I know a lot about the animal life and the plant life. You know who doesn't and who's wanting to learn that? Kids. You know who is a huge audience for podcasts? Kids. How do I know that? My kids listen to like 4 or 5 different podcasts. And sometimes they're more narrative driven. Sometimes they're a lot like Radiolab, just more simplistic. Man, okay, now I'm thinking, what type of podcast would I make? Would I have experts on? Would I do this? Would I do that? And what I would say to him is, one, what do you have time for? What gives you energy?
Yeah.
Do you want to set up interviews with experts? Do you want to get creative? Are you trying to learn your craft? And so you want to incorporate, have your editor incorporate sound effects or whatever the case may be. Are you going to do only audio? Do you want to do video? There's tons of options here.
Yep.
So when you sit down, this was a really good example, even in this just case study scenario of sitting down and really talking out the details, getting specific about what what you're interested in. I'm talking specifically to voice actors right now because I would approach this a little differently with like B2B business owners.
Sure.
But your whole job is creativity. Your clients hire you because you sound different, but you sound exactly like what they're looking for their particular product that is different from something else that you probably wouldn't, like Rob probably wouldn't do as well maybe with like, we'll use the shoe example again, a shoe commercial. Maybe that's not exactly where he's at.
Yep.
But he does really well with these narrative, documentary, explainer video voiceovers. That's really important because if you don't tend to gravitate towards a certain genre, don't approach that with your podcast, I will say.
Yep.
I think it'll be much more difficult. So we want you to have a good element of feeling comfortable and getting curious.
This is really interesting. Just as I listen to you walk through this and thinking about if you are willing, if this is a channel that you're thinking about exploring, podcasting is a channel you're thinking about exploring. If you just have a legitimate open brainstorm with yourself, because I think that's challenge one is we have edited brainstorms with ourselves. We don't have open brainstorms with ourselves.
I could not have said that better.
Yeah. If you would just stop second guessing everything that's coming into your mind and just write it all down and then look at it all on a piece of paper. Like as I'm listening to you talk through this scenario with Rob, I'm picturing 5 different channels of podcasts that I could start for myself just listening to you walk through the process. And it has nothing to do with Africa or any of the things you were talking about, but just listening to you walk through that process, I'm realizing, wow, there's so many different ways that you could incorporate a podcast or do that. And so if you would just give yourself permission to work through that exercise freely, you might be surprised what you come up with.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Most of my hurdles in what I do right now, particularly with more of the small business owners, is, well, can you read what I wrote? Because I don't know if it sounds good. I don't know. I don't know what sounds good to you. Yeah. I don't know your background. I don't know your expertise that you're bringing to the table. I'm trying to help you formulate and guide you. So exactly like what you said, if this is a legitimate marketing channel for you and you're interested in maybe have some budget and some time, sit down, have an unedited brainstorm. I'm a firm believer in ChatGPT. It is my help these days with,
Yep.
okay, I'm stuck.
Yep.
Reword that for me.
Yep.
Rephrase that for me. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the person that I'd like to chat with, whatever the case may be. 10 times out of 10, it gives me an idea I didn't think of, to be totally honest.
No, it's so true. Jarvis, I literally went into ChatGPT at one point when I signed up for the paid one, and I was like, from now on, I will call you Jarvis. And ChatGPT is like, okay. And so I
Sounds great.
literally interact with Jarvis
I love it.
for brainstorming and all of that. And it's so true. But no, I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm thinking, there is not a good reason that I can think of why every voice actor at the very least didn't have some sort of storytelling podcast, because at the end of the day, isn't that what we all are? Like, we could all go out and start one of those tomorrow in a genre or a subject matter that interests us. And if you just started that, you'd have something. But you could work through it, obviously, in so many different ways to get in front of. And here's the other thing: everybody's favorite subject is to talk about is themselves, right? And they're probably their second most favorite subject to talk about is the thing that they know or the thing that they do.
Exactly.
Which is why it is so easy to get guests on your show. Because if you come to somebody and say, I want you to come on your show and tell me about yourself and what you do,
Yeah.
like, you literally just hit two of them.
Yeah.
Like, now, can I reach out to, whatever, name the A-list of any genre? And I'm not even specifically talking voiceover right now. I'm just saying, can I reach out to, some big celebrity and get them on my show? Not necessarily, but can I come a few rungs down the ladder and reach out to somebody at that level and slowly work my way up over time? Yeah, of course, it becomes a really cool tool to get you in the room with people that you might not otherwise have been able to get in the room with.
I have said countless times in being in the podcasting space for a while, I could never have imagined the opportunities it would have presented for me when I wasn't even looking for them. I am confident that I'm in the job now that I have and all the other things that have happened just because of saying yes to something very small and continuing to say yes and being curious. Being curious is key. Having an unedited perspective is also key. And allowing yourself to throw out the old playbook of downloads and numbers are the only things that matter. They matter for certain things. And that's it. So put them in their box and focus on what it is you really want to do. Because if you want to make a podcast and you want to use it to market your business, that's exactly what it's going to do.
So we walked through some of the steps of what we should do, figuring out our point of view, thinking about the subject matters that interest us, thinking about format. Is it going to be me? Is it going to be guests? And, we talked through some of that stuff and working through some of those beginner steps, which I think are fantastic. On the flip side of that, what's one of the biggest rookie mistakes that you see people making that you're just like, oh, stop doing that?
I have a few of them.
I was going to say, I think I just hit a nerve.
Well, so I come at it from I'm self-taught.
Yep.
I learned how to edit, did all the things. I know about tech only because I'm interested. I come at it from a very curious perspective, but also a very geeky perspective is how I would describe it. I'm very nerdy about it.
Yep.
Quality is no longer nice. Quality is essential. If you are doing an audio only show, your quality better be the best.
Right.
If you're doing a video and audio show, you better make sure your host at least has good audio and good video, period, across the board, no excuses. And then try with your guests is what I would say. That's the only place that I tend to have a bit of flexibility because, especially in my world, I'm talking to a lot of C-suite people. They're in hotel rooms. I can't get precious about that kind of thing, but I can at least frame them and make sure their lighting is good.
Yep.
So there are things like that when it comes to just before you even hit record that I am very particular on personally, but it's because 2 seconds of listening to bad audio, I'm out.
Yep.
And most
It's
likely
true.
I won't engage again unless you've made it very clear to me that has been changed. So there are lots of things, but quality matters.
Audio should not be a problem for those of us in the voiceover
No.
space.
And hey, another benefit to you doing your thing, you've already got some of the tech,
You've got
hopefully
some of
all
the
of
cover.
it.
Let's talk about that. We've got microphones, we've got studio setups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what are some of the basic tools? Like, I know over time I've added some extra lighting, I've added a roadcaster, I've changed out a microphone, like I've done some things over time to try to make the podcast look a little better or sound a little better or stuff like that. But it
Yeah.
happened over time. I didn't have
Yep.
all this stuff right out of the gate. So we're
Do
talking
yeah.
about this startup podcaster.
Yep.
We'll assume that they've got their audio, right? We've got a microphone and we've got all that sort of stuff. Are there some basic tools that you recommend that we look into, whether that's software based or hardware based or whatever? What are some of those early tools that we should be looking for that could make our life a little bit easier or make our podcasting journey a little bit better?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing that I would always tell when I was actively teaching kind of newbie voice actors was work with what you have until you have more to work with.
Hmm.
So if you've got a mic, amazing.
Yep.
Then start only audio. And then if you're interested, because I think it's kind of essential now, having a social strategy, just get creative with how you do social. You can do a vertical video on your phone. It is extremely low barrier now to share anything.
Yep.
So don't allow that to keep you from doing what you're doing. If you are not tech savvy, learn from other people who are.
Yep.
There are endless free resources. I use Adobe Audition still, and I've learned from Mike Russell. He's been my go-to. Adobe goes to him for teaching some of their people. So he has so much free content on YouTube. So check these people out.
Yep.
I would say start there. I don't want to provide too many resources, but get really good at your audio if you're not already. That helps you in your voiceover career. That helps you in podcasting. Pretty much anything that you're doing as a voice actor, learning more about your audio cannot hurt and will make you better. And it'll also help you to listen. What am I hearing? What am I not hearing? So yeah, endless benefits there. But I think the first thing I would say, especially for voice actors, get really good at your audio and learn a software if you don't already, and then learn from the people who know most, if not everything, about those pieces of software.
We're recording this right now in Riverside, which is not where I started. Obviously, it's another one of those things where I worked my way up to it. But and I love Riverside for what it gives me. Are there any platforms that you recommend?
Yeah, I love Riverside. We use it with
Yeah.
all of our clients. I used it at previous agency. Riverside is pretty much the standard now just because of the different features that it has, and they're
It's gotten
constantly
so good.
updating,
Oh, it's
which
gotten so
is
good.
fantastic.
Yep.
You want to look for this is actually a really good point for anybody, but in particular people who are in audio, always look for companies who are constantly iterating.
Yep.
They know what's going on. They've got people on their team who understand the ins and outs. I think Riverside is a really great example. Again, we talked about like Adobe. I just use Adobe Audition. I started with Audacity. I used Audacity for years and waited and waited and waited until the last possible moment to learn a new software because it's
Yep.
hard. It
Yep.
hurts, but you also get better. So I would highly recommend Riverside if you're wanting to do a video component.
I remember when I first started with Riverside, I hated it in the beginning. I just found it incredibly frustrating. It felt like it was very buggy early
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And now I can't imagine doing this without, like, the amount of improvement that they have made. Even in the last 6 or 8 months, the amount of improvement is crazy.
I also love the roles. So I came on as a guest. I assume that you're logged in as a host. You can
Yep.
also invite someone as your producer. So if you have someone you work with, they can come on, they can sit in the background, they're not recorded. I love those kind of features. So anything
Yeah.
that allows me to do my job better, I'm all for it. And Riverside does a good job.
So we've walked through the entire process for somebody who is now thinking, okay, this might be me. This might be for me. I might be ready to do this. But Melanie, I need a little hand holding. Melanie, I need a little help. Need a little guidance. Tell me what you do and how you do it and how we can participate in it.
I'm so glad you asked. This was not planned, actually, everybody. But we offer an accelerator and a cohort. So this is
Okay.
our kind of lowest barrier to entry offering while offering you the best value without you having to spend just a ridiculous amount of money. If this is you, if you've got time, if you've got energy, if you've got the motivation to get going, I would highly recommend checking it out. We walk you through everything and so much more that I did on the show today. We're going to help you get clear on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then we're going to help you with production. So for those of you who are starting on your own, do what we talked about. Check out some software, get yourself familiar with what you're doing, work with what you have until you have more to work with. If you do have more to work with, if you have a little bit of a budget, and it doesn't need to be share your genius, though I think that we do an exceptional job at it, find a partner who helps you and who knows the industry, because that's key. I've known a lot of people who have gotten involved with different people, not necessarily agencies, but individuals as well, and it's not been a good use of their time and resources. So vet them, ask questions, ask people in your network, but you can always reach out to me as well, and I'll provide Marc with my contact info.
I think that it's really easy to say, oh, yeah, I can go to YouTube and I can watch some videos or whatever. And you can do those things. Absolutely. There are people who are going to teach you all this stuff and teach you how to get started and whatever. But there's also something to be said for, do I want to spend 50 hours on YouTube watching videos trying to figure out how to do this? Or do I want to pay somebody for an hour of their time who can help me get started right out of the gate? Not that
Yeah.
it's going to take just an hour, but you get what I'm saying, right?
I mean,
Why?
that's why I do what I do, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's like
exactly.
I see the value. I see the value in both. I've been both.
Yep.
I was blissfully ignorant when I first started, but now I'm more
Hallelujah.
knowledgeable. And the industry has changed so much, and our
Yep.
world has changed. Algorithms change. There are so many things, and this is what I always tell my clients: you don't need to know that. It is my job to know that.
Yep.
So that's what me and other individuals like me, we offer, that is the knowledge and the expertise and the hand holding if you need it.
Right on. What's the website if somebody wants to go check out the website?
Yeah, just shareyourgenius.com. And then feel
Shareyourgenius.com.
free to
Okay.
connect with me and ask me questions on LinkedIn.
Right on. We'll include that stuff in the show notes so that it's easy to find. This has been really good.
I'm so
If
glad. I
if at
had fun.
least if at least a few people listening did not come up with an idea for a podcast, I will be floored. Like I
Should we
could
do a
not imagine.
challenge?
Should we do a challenge?
I think we should do a
What do you
challenge.
got in mind?
I'm thinking create your show. I know that people listening have ideas for a show, and they've either got a Google folder like I personally have and still add to it to this day, or they've got it written down on paper as we're talking, or they're thinking of ideas as they're driving or wherever they are. I would love to see what other people get out of the conversation that we've had today. So I don't know what that looks like, but I want to know.
So at the very least, we want an Instagram story with a
Ooh.
tag saying, here are a couple of the ideas that I've come up with and I'm now workshopping. At the
I
very least, we need
will
that.
offer a review. If you tag me on, I'm not on Instagram, but tag Marc, tag Share Your Genius. If you want me to personally review your podcast idea, tag me on LinkedIn at Melanie Scroggins.
Okay, we'll put
I'll
that
do
in the
it.
show notes.
Okay. And
So
provide feedback.
if you come up with the idea, get ready to go. A
I
review,
love it.
an opportunity for a review. Come on. How do you say no to that?
I love it. I'm
How do you say
excited.
no to
I
that?
hope
If
they're
that's what you've
excited.
been thinking about, how do you say no to that? Melanie, this is awesome.
I
I
had so much
I
fun.
I feel
Thank
really
you.
good about inspiring a couple of people to explore podcasting as an opportunity. And here's the other thing. I don't want to say this, but I feel like I should say this. We're so afraid about AI, right? And what that's going to do to
Mm,
voiceover. Podcasting still feels very safe to me.
yeah.
Could you create a AI that could tell the stories? I suppose, but podcasting still feels very safe to me. And so this is an area where, like, if you're opening up a new channel for your business, whether that becomes a direct income stream or an indirect income stream, or maybe you don't even know at this point, but you're just laying the foundational groundwork, you're opening up a new stream of your business that I think is safe for a while.
I
What's the
agree.
downside?
Because like we talked about, it's never just a podcast. So
Yeah.
depending on where you're sharing, no matter where you are, you own it.
Yep.
You've got the files, you've got the transcript, you've got those relationships that you created, you've
Yep.
got emails, whatever comes out of it.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Cool. This is so good. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your genius, as it were.
I love
Good
it.
name.
Thanks so much for having me, Marc. I had a great time.